Great. So I think that we can start. So we can stop sharing the screen. Great. So nice to see you all. So, dear friends, today we will have a discussion, and in order to keep our discussion smooth and to keep everything okay, we initially said that speakers and our speakers can share the screen and speak whenever they are able to. And if you want to add something, and then you will be able to ask your questions at the end of our discussion, please either raise your hand, or throughout the discussion, please write your ideas and questions into the chat, and we will return to your questions at the end of our meeting, because we have a very tight agenda today. So we'll be able to discuss everything at the end in order to give enough time to our speakers to present their views, to exchange their opinions, and to bring us their wisdom. So let me begin. We are live today at our YouTube channel. So if you are not familiar to Living Cities Earth, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And today I would invite us to speak about a very acute but very important topic: designing for peace in the Middle East. How a stratified evolutionary approach to governance can diffuse conflict and bring lasting peace to a troubled world. And we are talking today about the tensions in the Middle East, but of course we tacitly mean all geopolitical issues which are currently burning on our planet. And we'll try to pay attention to different aspects of problems with which humanity faces today in terms of tensions and war conflicts. We are not aiming to find the guilt and the guilty ones and blame any side. We have convened today, first of all, with the best minds on our planet, I would say, to find the pathways to peace and unity and aliveness for all the humanity. So first of all, let me introduce our wonderful, brilliant speakers who will contribute today to our discussion. Let me introduce to you Said Dalabani, developmental theorist who uses multiple evolutionary approaches to frame macro system challenges from the geopolitics to economics. Alongside with Don Beck and Elza Malouf, he co-founded the Center for Human Emergence Mid-East in 2004. And their aim was to implement new leadership models capable of diffusing conflicts and making peace in this region. Neri Bar-On, hi, co-founder of Integral Israel. He is an electronics engineer with degrees from the Tel Aviv University in Economics and Philosophy. Neri was trained by Don Beck and Peter Mary and supported visits to Israel and Palestine, Don Beck and Elza Malouf. Hi. Our next brilliant speaker is David Gershon, founder and CEO of Empowerment Institute. He has been called the #1 expert on social change and dedicated his life to empowering humanity to believe we can create the world of our dreams and design the strategies to make this a reality. Hi, David. Merlin Hamilton, co-founder of Integral City Meshworks, author of the Integral City book series. Her meshworking, appreciative inquiry, and action research methodologies build capacity for individuals, groups, organizations, and communities to inquire, act, and impact social well-being in the cities and in the countries, I believe so. Hello, Merlin. Alexander Laszlo, our wonderful co-founder of Living Cities Earth, a polycultural systemic scientist, the 57th president of the International Society for the Systems Science, known for his works on systems theories and education ecosystems. He, furthermore, is the president of the board of directors of the Bertalanffy Center for the Study of Systemic Science and the director of research at the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research. Hi, Alexander. So grateful to you all that you found your time to contribute. So about myself, I will moderate this discussion. My name is Marina Demchenko. I need to rename myself. I'm the co-founder of Living Cities Earth. I define myself as an earthling with Slavic roots, originally from Russia, so the topic of peace has a personal meaning for me as well. I'm PhD in economics, an expert in integral personal, organizational, and societal development, and the first advisor to the mayor of the city on the holistic well-being and happiness of citizens. So that was my official appointment and area of my scientific research and practical implementation of the integral approach. So I think that our discussion today will last about 1 hour and 40 minutes. I don't think that we will be able to finish in 1 hour and a half. So please, if you have spare time, feel free to stay with us. And I hope that today's discussion will be very important and useful and maybe healing for many of us. So let's start, dear friends. First of all, I would suggest us to briefly clarify the historical context of the problem, because, you know, when I was preparing this meeting, some aspects suggested delving into the history of the Middle East for 2,000 years ago. But some of the experts emphasize that the problem only emerged in the 20th century. So what should we know before we start discussing the topic of designing a peace in Middle East? And let us then maybe broaden our vision to the peacemaking itself. So please, maybe Said, we have discussed with you this historical context. Maybe you could start with this discussion, and then I will invite all our speakers to contribute. So please, Said.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here. Very nice to see so many prominent people on the panel. I'd like to maybe start with something that became apparent to me and everyone else who studied with Don Beck about macro and geopolitical issues, about geopolitics and matters of that nature, is that to pursue strictly a historic narrative on who's entitled to the land and when is really only a partial way to address the conflict. Every time, it has been our experience, every time that issue came up, the Jews have been here for 2,000 years. No, the Arabs have been. It freezes their positions in rigid positions. And the more data they have on, oh, well, this Jewish tribe was here 2,500 years ago, it rigidifies that position with more data. The Arabs find, we had a tribe, going back 3,000 years ago. That rigidifies their position as well. So it is almost fruitless to approach it just from the historic narrative. So what we learned to do is, in addition to the historic narrative, add a layer of developmental narrative. And once you do that, a lot of opportunity frees itself up to say, aha, maybe we can work on this, maybe we can work on that. So just briefly to address this issue from the historic narrative, if you go back 2,000 years, life conditions in the Middle East were all tribalistic. They were all tribes. People say, you can't solve the problem. Arabs and Jews have been fighting for 2,000 years. Yes, that's true. Arabs fought Jews, and Arabs fought Arabs, and Jews fought Jews. That's the nature of tribal existence. They're very protective of the meager existence that they have, and anybody that tries to invade that, they fight them off. So that issue falls by the wayside, that it is a tribalistic issue once you move culture into a higher state of existence. suddenly, the attachment to the land dissolves and they seek higher order resolutions like we have here in the West. So, the narrative of 2,000 years is that the culture is tribalistic, and the problem really developed, in my opinion, in the last 100 years or so, and not for the reasons that you think. The creation of the State of Israel was only part of the problem. The bigger problem is how the colonial powers that were administering the region, so both England and France, just for those 4 decades between World War I and World War II, the way they divided up the land into nations is a geopolitical format that never existed in the Middle East. Nations represent a 4th stage of development in spiral dynamics. It's a blue system that believes in the abstract concept of institutions. The Middle East never had that. It's still tribalistic to this day. So you bring in a system that is designed from with foreign content, Western content, that's 4 stages above where the culture, that's at the 4th stage of development, when the culture is the 2nd stage of development, there sure is to be conflict. So the basic narrative behind that is not only is the fight now with Israel, but also the fights are within tribes, within countries. All of a sudden, they were repressed by the colonial powers, be it the Romans for 1,500 years, followed by the Ottomans. They were equally repressive. They will not allow any geopolitical formations to rise above the tribe because they would create a threat to their leadership. And the Ottomans were masters at the divide and conquer strategy. They realized maybe one tribe is getting stronger as it fights another tribe. They empower the other tribe to keep the tribe that's getting stronger weak. This has been the history of the region for 2,000 years. And suddenly comes in this idea of nations where tribal values tell those people, we're no longer repressed, we're in a nation, and they can only act from tribalistic values in the sense, I want to claim the land now to my tribe. So they start fighting other tribes. This is really the primary reason behind all the conflict in the Middle East, not just Israel and Palestine, but civil wars, the way, dictators repress their people. It's just the next stages of development that have been imposed on them instead of having those emerge naturally and indigenously. So that's at the heart of the problem. So, the short answer is, on the top of the historic narrative, lay a developmental narrative that opens up the space to other possibilities.
Thank you so much, Said. Neri, would you maybe add something from...
Yeah, I will try to add a few things. One of the things is that we are a system within a system within a system. So it's very easy to talk about the Israeli-Palestine conflict, but we must look at the Israeli inner conflicts that already exist. And before this current war, we had it bloom. And the Palestinian conflicts, although they are different kind of conflict because the Palestinian people are different than the Israeli Jewish, and also we have Arabs, but the Israeli Jewish people, but there are 2 inner conflict, and there is the upper conflict between Israel and Palestine that are fed by those inner conflict, which means the extremists of one conflict actually collaborating with the extremes of the other conflicts. So in this play, they create the conflict, the higher conflict between Israel and Palestine, while there are inner conflicts that need to be resolved in order to set the condition of change. So Israel need to change in order to Palestinians to change. Palestinians need to change in order to be able to adjust to the realities that we have here.
Thank you. David, Marilyn, Alexander, do you want to add something from your perspective?
My main comment is just how brilliant this analysis is and such great context for how to think about a change process. We have to have a good sense of where we are so we know how to really transform from that current place. So just affirmation for that insight from my perspective.
And I would concur. Thank you for inviting me to comment. I feel that I may be more of a witness to this conversation, but I've been participating in a conference, a summit on feminine intelligence. And I hear embedded even within the tribal and national conflicts, all the kinds of possibilities that cross over from generations and genders as well. So I think that we have to be very respectful of the people in the area. And I also really concur with Said's and Don Beck's proposition that we must look at this through developmental lenses. So thank you.
And thank you, Marina and our panel. You know, I think what Neri was saying also about this being truly an embedded systems issue is key. And that's something I'm going to be perhaps sharing a little bit more about further on. But what's wonderful about this panel, I think, is that we can bring different levels of engagement and perspective, kind of the looking at it from the larger, what does this mean to be a human perspective? And looking at it from the specific, the people on the ground, what does this mean to somebody who's living there? For me, the key issue is this contextual appreciation of peace. Because peace is not the same thing for somebody who is in the midst of the horror, the terror of things and people being blown apart around them. The suggestions for living in peace and for what it means to find peace in yourself, very different for somebody in that situation than if you're going to be looking at this from the armchair of a person sitting in their study in Buenos Aires. Hello, that's me. So being able to think about this and bring but is one more valid than the other? No, I think we need to look at this from this multiple perspective framework to be able to understand peace as an engagement with life. But again, contextually relevant engagement. The last thing I'll say, and I'll pass it back to you, Marina, is if I had a magic wand, and you know, I think I do have a magic wand. In fact, I think all of us have this magic wand. It's the wand of being able to zoom in and zoom out. It's the wand of that empathy and compassion to be able to say, what is it like for the animals, for the plants, for the people who are in the midst of this terror? And to be able to zoom out and be able to say, what does it mean to be human on this planet? And how are we doing as an expression of life on Earth? So, and everything in between. So this is the zooming that I would like us to be able to do with full engagement with each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexander. So we agreed that Said will give us the more deep context, the deeper context of the evolutionary development theory and understanding of the perspective of growing up evolutionary of social systems through the perspective of the integral approach and spiral dynamics. And then we will bring into this context the wisdom of our speakers from their own perspectives. By such, I hope that we will enrich our vision with different models, which are in fact creating this holistic view on peacemaking and designing the social systems for peace. So, Said, please, the microphone.
Thank you, Rita, for putting such an awesome responsibility on my shoulders. I'm sure the minute I'm done, the world's going to live in peace forever. And, you know, all we can do is really share thoughts about, you know, different ways of thinking and modes of approaching this, you know, it's all different facets of the same diamond that is peace, and it is peace as a byproduct, as I said before, as a byproduct of design. And you know, I want to comment on something that Neri brought earlier, which apparently is now becoming a priority in Israel, and that is so we have a toolbox, if you will, you know, called the algorithm of peace, and in it falls like 4 or 5 different major geopolitical training modules, if you will, for people who want to use this, you know, like heads of the Centers for Human Emergence for macro and geopolitical issues. And one of those tools that Neri referred to is called the assimilation contrast effect. It really, you know, when you have a conflict, you put it on this model that shows the left side of the position and you know, the 2 sides of the conflict, left and right, basically. Okay, well, what Don Beck has done is he's taken that model and added to it the different levels of that exist on the developmental stage. So he, for example, put the if you think of it as a triangle with the center being on the top, the center being the political center that moves slowly and compromises, but moves somewhat progressively towards where the culture is. The center being on the top, and the lower rungs of the two legs of the triangle are the extreme positions. So you get the flamethrowers who are settled in that red system that want nothing but to destroy. You get those on both sides, on both the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. You get the ideologues, the ones who are stuck to, religious doctrine, or, the state of Israel has the right to exist regardless. And then you get the moderates and the pragmatists. So all those different positions on that spectrum come together to form the conflict. Well, what we ignore a lot, and this might be, obvious to people, in designing peace solutions, but what we ignore is exactly what Neri talked about. As much as we look at the inter-conflict, we also look at the intra-conflict. The intra-conflict gives you a lot of insights on what the dynamics on the other side are like that are causing peace, or that center to move away and cause problems for that have been contributing towards peace. Neri, do you want to give the example of, I'll give the example of the Palestinians. The intra-conflict in the Palestinians is that Gaza can no longer be governed by Fatah. So there's definitely a clear division there. And the other side, on the other side, the Israelis took advantage of that. And if you've been listening to news reports the last couple of weeks or so, every Israeli leader who is non-conservative right has blamed Netanyahu for the problem, has blamed, Neri, if you want to talk more about that. I heard Ehud Barak talk about it in one of the news. I mean, he blames him squarely for what happened. And that is, for him aligning with the radical, flame-throwing zealots, religious people, to say, hey, we're gonna allow Hamas to rise as a power, and allow them to have the money and the funding and everything else, just to show the world that we cannot sign peace with a terrorist organization like that. Therefore, our rights to never pursue a two-state solution is intact. You want to comment a little bit on that, and I'll maybe.
Just before the current war, we had a lot of demonstration, and the public in Israel was split strongly. And one of the side was the government, which was formed with extreme religious ideologues. And their idea is to have one Jewish state on the historic land of Eretz Israel, and they usually are settlers, and they are not majority, but the way it's formed in Israel enable them to grab a lot of power and influence. I claim that Israel is in a state of civil war, because on the other side were more the liberal Israelis that were seeking solution. They've been considered by leftists, and because they're considered by leftists, they're considered as traitor. And Ehud Barak is on that side. So because we are people, we have a lot of blame game within Israel. So everybody blames the other side, but the core conflicts is somewhat of Israel identity. Is Israel a Jewish state where the Jewish religious core roots of being Israel are presenting themselves in the 21st century? Or Israel is a modern state that can protect all Jews, but it's a modern liberal Western entity? And this conflict become very, very edgy, and it seemed like the Palestinian side and the Arab side see it as a weakness. So they went forward thinking that they have opportunity to attack Israel.
And Neri, I would add to that it's some of the Arabs, not all of them, many of them have moderated their positions toward Israel, as you've seen with the Abraham Peace Accords.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that, but you're right.
Well, it was Donald Trump doing the picking the low-hanging fruit, but the issue that's way more dangerous is that Iran, I don't want to fall into the same situation where I say they're intelligent, but they are intelligent, and they put their intelligence towards that ideological Islamic revolution that they believe in, and so they have their pulse on what's going on in Israel. They sense weakness. They sense when someone is trying to pull the rug out from under them from claiming their right to legitimacy by committing themselves to throwing Israel in the sea. That is their ideology has attracted a lot of underserved Shia in the Arab world. And so the Sunni world sort of like allies itself with other Sunnis against the Shia. So I think the possible peace with Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf is due to that, rising friction that Iran wants to incorporate what's called the Shia crescent from Iran through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon to create an immediate front, on the Israeli border vis-a-vis Hezbollah to the north. These are very dangerous developments. The Iranians have been supporting them and funding them. And so the issue now is equally as much as it is Iran, a Persian power, not Arab, a Persian power telling the Shia world that is spread throughout the Middle East that there is a new Islamic revolution that gives you purpose. And that, for people who've been disempowered, the Shia all throughout history, being disempowered in the region, that gives them purpose. And so they're all aligning behind Iran, and Iran does not blink with that issue. The greater danger is Iran, not the Arab world.
Yeah, I add that the Arab world, like Saudi Arabia was discussing some kind of agreement with Israel that theoretically could benefit the Palestinian, but also in a way put them aside. And it's considered one of the reasons of the events, like the Palestinians were left out of the picture. And they want to get, actually with this acts they did towards Israel, they brought in, and so this is another element in this global thing.
So if I can just discuss a couple more other, those tools that we have in our toolbox for large scale design. So that was the assimilation contrast effect. Look at the intra-conflict as much as you look at the inter-conflict. The way to keep the debate about peace in the middle, in the center, meaning that you give and take, but you never move to the fringes, is for each side of every party to repress those zealots, to push them away. The minute you detect the chit chat about oh no, we're gonna we're settlers, we're gonna take our guns and try to evict some Palestinian families in the West Bank, or we're Gaza, we're gonna, dig tunnels and kill innocent Israelis. You have to repress. You have to have the ability to repress those, and if you don't, they will become the cause of not only the conflict getting bigger, but the fall of your own side as well. I mean, this is common. This is a pattern now proven to be true. Look at what's happening now with Israel on the fall of Netanyahu. His popularity. 70% of Israelis want him gone. Right? Is that? Yeah, the same thing happened in the United States. It started 25 years ago. The Republicans, there was a new entity that came into American politics called the Tea Party. The Tea Party were zealots, and it was the GOP's responsibility to push them away. But instead, they accepted them into the mainstream GOP, which allowed the party to go down slope to give us MAGA and Trump. To ignore those dynamics is the absolute basis for the erosion of democracy. So that's the assimilation contrast model in a nutshell. You need to keep the pragmatists and the conciliators, the people who can achieve peace, you need to keep them as close as the center, while at the same time, they're pushing away the radical elements in their respective cultures. If you don't do that, any piece that's on the board is jeopardized. The only other major tool that applies to the situation that Neri is aware of as part of our work that took place is, after you do the cultural assessment, after you evaluate, after you use what we call the indigenous intelligence, people from the specific area that you're looking to design for. So when we went into the Middle East, it wasn't Don and Elza designing for peace in Israel. We sought out Neri to tell us what Israel is like. Very intelligent, very well educated in the spiral dynamics and the integral theory, and desiring peace. On the same side, although Elza and I are Lebanese Arabs, we're not Palestinians. We did not trust that our judgment, and the Palestinians, did wonders in destroying Lebanon. So, inherently, we might have some bias towards the Palestinians, but we're at least objective enough to find Palestinian partners who can tell us what the indigenous intelligence says. So you get these people and you create mimetic profiles. You create, social profiles of the culture, what their motivation is, what their center of gravity is, along which section of the spiral they fall in, which, 3 or 4 different levels of development make up the center of gravity of their culture, and then you compare the two. And what we discovered is that while Israel is here, it's a byproduct of modern democracy. The Palestinians are still down here, struggling to leave their tribalistic life behind, way less complex cultural profile than Israelis were. So what we did after the first year of working there, the mission changed from seeking peace in the Middle East to leveling the asymmetry between Israel and Palestine, meaning that the Palestinians were primarily in that red system, struggling, especially after the birth of Israel, struggling with that red system, the egocentric system in its unhealthy expression. All it is wants to destroy. All it does is seek bloodshed and destruction. So we, and if that's the cultural expression, we needed to build the systems where, the Palestinians can emerge to the next stage of development, which is the 4th stage, the foundation at which democracies are established. And so we shifted from calling our mission a peace mission to Build Palestine Initiative. For years, that was known as Build. And what we were doing is training people on how to become familiar with the 4th level of development, where you believe in the absolute abstract concept of a democracy, of institutions. It is no longer the power of the hero, it is the power of the institution. This is a huge transition. Historically, this has been the biggest transition in humanity anywhere. The transition between red till, you kill everybody, then what? And then when you come to that realization that you are immortal, you are mortal yourself, that you're not immortal, you begin to think in terms of building institutions that can carry on something that's more equitable. That, leveling the asymmetry, that's what we worked on, is showing Palestinians how to build the structures and the entities that will move the Palestinian people from a red system to start building institutions. And so that's one of the tools.
Yes, that's absolutely compelling and great. And let us ask our.
I want to add a few things, just a few things. One of the things is that we are less seeking peace, we are seeking flow, in the deeper sense of flow, because as we can get inner peace, we are living in a boiling spiral of system within system. And what Said described with all this difference, we cannot get the same process in Israel and in Palestine. It's not equal, it's not fair, it doesn't have all the attributes that we usually seek when we're talking about peace. So I think emphasize on flow is important. And I had another thing, but I lost it. So, yes, and this is very important. There are times when the minds are open. Israel in shock. We are now making Palestinian into a shock. If they're not only in Gaza, I guess that in West Bank, they'll get it sooner or later. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's going to be reality. So now if you talk with Israelis, they're going down spiral. They want all Hamas killed. They don't care. All these peaceniks, Israeli peaceniks, now say, okay, now we know they don't want us, we want to kill them. So in a way, after the war, maybe we'll have opportunity, but we need the tools ready. If we only have this theoretical discussion, it's good, it's make us more wise, but the effect will be much less than what we wish for. So we need also to look at the opportunity that can come from this conflict. That's it.
Thank you so much. Alexander, would you give us your perspective, maybe what you have said and what you have heard and what you would like to maybe say about?
Thank you so much. And I'll try to be brief. I know there's so much that we have to share here. You know, for me, the fact that we are living right now in a world where there are, according to the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights, more than 110 armed conflicts currently going on around the world. And that some of them have started recently, but some of them have lasted more than 50 years. Yes, what we're seeing right now, this conflagration, this current volatility, this and the terror of the intensity of what is going on right now in the Middle East is, and not only the terror and the intensity, but also the potential, the threat for global dynamics to be swept up in this. This, for me, is a call for engaging what it means to be human. How do we human well? And I know that spiral dynamics and Claire Graves' work behind that is all about addressing these different levels of our being. And this gives us the ability to empathize with and to help see how we can speak to the listening of people who are at the different levels. Very important. And there are a few principles which I think all of humanity needs to listen into now. And this has to do with flow that Neri was just talking about. You can't solve violence with violence. I mean, again, we can talk about how are we doing this elsewhere and so on, right? But this is what Gandhi beautifully said about how an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And I myself have spent now 39 years, I continue to study, just yesterday was my training, in the martial arts. So I know what it is when you are in a situation where there is intense engagement. Of course, my martial arts are safe because I'm not actually being attacked. And yet in that moment, you can let your emotions and your sense of outrage get the better of you. And this is the shock that Mary was just talking about. When you move into that kind of stage, you are in a blind rage engagement. In a beautiful article that Thomas Friedman wrote in the New York Times just recently, an op-ed, the title of which is Israel is about to make a terrible mistake. But in his article, I think he's calling for this kind of perspective. He says, friends don't let friends drive while enraged. So how do we help each other so that we don't engage in this dynamic? And just to round this out, my good and recently deceased friend, Lawrence Bloom, said, we can always ask the question in any situation, whoever we are, wherever we are, what would love do? It's so hard. I tell you, and as a martial artist, I know it's hard. But indeed, the term martial arts in Chinese characters, if you were to take it apart, it means stop swords or stop fighting. this is the nature of this. We're not being warriors for peace. The idea is, because that's an antilogy. It doesn't work. But how do you stop? How do you come in and say, wait, how can we human well? This is not humaning well. And finally, just to say that peace is not the destination. It's not that we're going to get to now. It's going to be peaceful in the Middle East. We're just done. We've arrived. Peace is not something to be obtained. Peace is a path. It's a daily practice. It's an engagement. And this idea, Thich Nhat Hanh also talks about this, that peace is the way. It is the path. It is about learning how to human well together on this planet. And this is the test that we as human beings on this planet are now being put to, with all our 110 conflicts around the world, and this one being a conflagration. We're being asked, can we human well together? Not just to solve the political aspects. I have a degree in political science, international and comparative politics. Yes, we can get, and it's important to get down to these aspects that say, what are the particular solutions? But being able to keep that higher or deeper sense of what it means to be human on this planet today, in today's age, and to ask that question, what would love do? And have that guide our path of response. I think for politicians or for anyone thinking about this, yes, we can always deal with the particulars. For example, the article I mentioned, Thomas Friedman does mention some possible solutions, but they're not easy and they're not likable, but there are solutions, but only if we don't go forward in rage. Back to you, Mary. And you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Alexander. And we have discussed with David the issue of what the peace can look like in the Middle East and all around the world. What should be done? And Anne-Marie Verhoeven also wrote in our chat. So how can we lower this shock? So David, up to you. What do you think could be done, and what is a bottom-up second-order change approach to peace, which you suggest in your work and in your global movement of peace on earth?
Well, thank you, Marina, for the opportunity to share some thoughts, and thank you for the brilliant analysis. For me, the analysis is the starting point. In our empowerment model, we have 4 steps. Where are we now? I think we have a fair sense of where we are now, but to empower someone, you have to answer 3 more questions. What do we want it to look like? What's our vision? And then what do we need to change to achieve that vision, which is the transformation step? And then what's the next place of growth? We call that the growing edge, the place which is available for growth, like a plant. It's the next place opening the next bloom opening up on a plant. You don't want to go over the growing edge. So I'm in learning mode as much as I am in potentially offering thoughts. But let me offer a context about social change itself that includes and transcends the Middle East. Think of this as a teachable moment for humanity right now in the Middle East. I think of it as a catalysis moment. And so let me give some context around the notion of second order change for a moment, and then maybe how to think about a pathway forward. To speak to Alexander's observation, which is, what does a path of peace look like? How does that actually work? We know that peace right now is defined as the absence of war, which is a negation of something, but it is not actually building anything. So what does that look like? How do we do that? So let me offer this bigger context. So my work is a lot around how to really build what we call transformative social change interventions. And so let me just give you an analysis of the world from a social change perspective. So the world is a function of social systems: education, healthcare, political, financial, military is in play right now. These are systems, social systems that we construct to organize civilization. When those systems have a lot of stress, as our systems do right now, they start to become unstable. And they have stresses from different reasons. We've heard some of the stresses going on in the Middle East context, but there are many other stresses. There's the economic stresses. There are political stresses. Those systems become unstable. And when they become unstable, they start to perturbate or oscillate or gyrate and get unmoored from that which keeps it in place. The stability is now no longer in place. They're unstable. So what happens is those systems break down. And when those systems break down, they've either become dysfunctional or marginally functional. And that's the state of a lot of parts of our world right now, exacerbated by peace, the conflicts, the war conflicts, and the overall types of animosities we have, but also by climate and by other factors. But when they become unmoored, they also are no longer held in place, and they can evolve to a higher level of performance and social value, which is called second order change. A book I wrote, Social Change 2.0, is the process of how to facilitate second order change. So there is first order change interventions, and there's second order change interventions. So let me explain first order change interventions, because we are trying to facilitate some of those right now. First order change is at best incremental, and there are 4 core strategies for first order change. One is command and control legislation, forcing someone to change. The second one is financial incentives or disincentives, paying someone to change. The third is awareness campaigns, telling someone to change, and hopefully they will listen. They usually don't, because awareness doesn't change behavior. And the fourth one is protest, which is basically shaming, cajoling, whatever. When the situation requires second order change, which is what's required in the Middle East and many other places, and the first order change is not able to achieve it, you need to start thinking about another strategy, which we call empowerment, which is envisioning a possibility and giving people the tools to enable that. So getting people to want to change proactively. The work we're doing on Peace on Earth by 2030 is a vision of possible and the means to actually achieve it through these series of practices and through creating what we call Peace on Earth zones. And they're quite effective. That's a whole conversation. I'm going to just not go into the details of that, but just stay at this level, and then we can drill down a little bit if needed. So the way I see the situation is that we have to start thinking I think it was, I don't know whether it was said or Neri said, I don't remember who said this, but we have to be knowing how to be ready for when the opportunity comes. We can't be thinking now. I mean, Paul Hawkins said, if you are wanting to have an intervention when there's a breakdown, you have to be ready 5 years in advance. You can't be tinkering at the time. You actually have to have it available so it can really go right in and do the necessary incisive intervention. So we've been building such an intervention around this game and around this Peace on Earth zones and this movement. But the whole point of it is that we have to start transforming people's experience behaviorally of how to move in a new way in their lives. And so we've built these 7 practices, and they're the heart of this game, which teaches people how to go into a state of oneness with one another and befriend the other, how to celebrate our common humanity, how to honor that which we share, how to have a sense of cooperation with one another. These are practices that can be learned. They are not something you're going to use in the midst of a crisis. And they go on. There's 7 of them. So from my perspective, I think I add the most value. I'll build one context. I do a lot of work in climate as well. And I always say the best value I can bring is not at the UN conferences, but after the UN conferences have gone through all their talking, and now they're trying to figure out what to do. And they've run out of solutions because the 1.0 is not solving the 2.0 needs, then I can bring value. So I don't have an immediate solution to the crisis. It has to go through its phase. Right now, we're in the antigen phase. That is to say, there is now a intervention in the body politic, and there's antibodies being generated. The immune system is kicking in. So I think of the immune system, and it has to go through this phase, but the immune system is being built. I'm part of the immune system building, and I think a lot of the people who are thinking transformationally are part of the immune system. So I'm going to pause for now. I could go in a lot more detail. Maybe later on I'll talk more about the theory of change of our second order change process for peace on Earth. But for now, I'll pause.
Thank you, David. Marilyn, would you please add something? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Marina, and thank you, everyone. Yeah, I was thinking about Saeed's introduction of the ACE model, which was something I've been thinking about the last couple of days. And since I've been immersed not only in feminine intelligence, but a way of looking at context through systems, I wonder if Don, when he created that pattern, would have realized the extent to which our systems developmentally are not necessarily going through a linear sequence anymore. The global context means that, as you've already pointed out in the Israeli-Palestine conflict, there's inter and intra and Arabic, but there's also the whole rest of the world that's there. That Israel itself is a country which has been formed through migration. And so I'm just curious if anyone would like to comment on the intertwining, the intermeshing of many cultures and multiple developmental levels. You know, when I look at the situation, which is really, I find heartbreaking, literally, it feels like triage is needed. And who is there in the world to do the triage? And how have we been able to plan for that? So I feel like I'm curious if anybody thinks that we are able to grow into the wisdom needed to be able to survive the attack on a healthy system. I guess I would add another perspective, because sitting in several days with listening to the wisdom of the feminine intelligence, which was coming from both women and men, that I don't hear the voices, very many voices with feminine intelligence in these situations. So I'm just wondering if you notice whether those voices have been muted or silenced, or they're waiting in the wings to bring something forward that just has not been voiced yet. So those are the kinds of questions I'm bringing to this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to add something? Or shall we?
Just a couple of observations, Marilyn, on the ACE model. I'd like to think of it as a holonic structure with a lot more complexity than what we described. I only had 5 minutes to describe it, but when you're on the ground and you begin to figure out the synergistic relationships between different groups, the motivations of different groups that are on either side of the conflict, and you immerse yourself within that culture to really try to understand it at a deeper level, it gives complexity to the model. It allows you to see, which segments of that particular culture that you're working with that you can actually work with, and that they have enough power to affect the command and control structure as David described it. In addition to that, I mean, you talk about the world being an interconnected body. It absolutely is. So the ACE model also applies outwardly to see who really are the power brokers, number one, in politics, in economics, and social systems, and finance, and so on. But I fully agree with you. The feminine aspect of the universe, not just, whether it's male or female, but the feminine aspect of the universe is greatly absent from this debate. The feminine is relational, the male is agentic, and all the male has done is seek war, to show their masculinity. In Israel, in not Israel, but in Palestine, my wife Elza worked with women empowerment, and she had more insights on where there's been waste within the political system itself, led by men, and within Western agencies. It didn't matter whether it was, led by males or females. Within Western agencies, like like USAID, like the United Nations, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on programs like women empowerment, when the local intelligence tells us, for a fraction of what they spend on those, all we asked from them is to build a community center where women can go and learn basic skills, how to weave, how to learn basic English skills, computer skills. And none of them, all of them said, well, these are programs that have already been decided, and so you can't have them. So even the global structures that are out there, whether consciously or subconsciously, they exclude the feminine aspect of the human expression. As proven with our experience with the Palestinian population.
I want to add to that something. I'll take Alexander's description of zoom out and zoom in. I think when I'm zoom out, I'm fully aware of the feminine wisdom that we are part of, and I want to engage with it and be part of it. But when we zoom in those societies, they have structures that is not us. It's not where I'm living, and the way we need to engage with them we need to remember that, because the concept of peace, the concept of femininity, the roles within family is different. So we want to bring the big ideas to serve these communities, even the Israeli community. For instance, I can show you that in Israel Knesset, there are many feminine women, although there are not many in the government. Some of them express very masculine ideas about the conflict. So we need to. They do it in a feminine way, like one of the Knesset members that is part of the coalition will take a Jewish terrorist and says that because he's Jewish, is a nice person, and we should release him, although he killed Palestinians. So we have this kind of femininity ideas in the context of the state. It's a very complex situation, and we need to come from the broader, I think, our global understanding of reality, but take care of the realities of those societies that need gradual change. They cannot achieve a too high leap. Dawn's proposal is a half a level. I don't know exactly the dynamic of it, and I really agree with you about it has more variant. That's my sense too. But we need to look at this carefully and remember. And this is advice I got from Dawn. If the ideas that I will see in those communities will not attract me personally because where I'm at, but I need to respect them and like. We can seek a better governance to Palestinians, but it's seemingly not going to be a democratic society. And if we are pushing democratic society over them, they end up throwing the not like them Palestinian from roofs. So we need to respect them where they are.
If I may just add a couple of more comments, I think that pointing to bringing in the wrong or inappropriate perspective of a democracy, and I would say there are many democracies. And when I was using feminine, I was thinking more of a Gaian wisdom. So one of the things I'm observing is that do we think that being aware of Gaia care or Gaia intelligence is really and developmentally so advanced? Or can we go back to an indigenous perspective where there was a respect for all life? And the horror of these wars is they are destroying nature. So they're destroying the life conditions that would support any level of development. And I think that's kind of a paradoxical result, perhaps an unintended consequence. But there are people here who we have been deploring, not just the Israeli and Palestinian situation, but the Ukrainians. And I saw somebody put in the chat the recognition that there are thousands of people who have moved recently from the Ukraine to Israel. So now we've got actually multiple conflicts that are enmeshed. But I guess I'm wondering, is it possible to hold a Gaian wisdom and indigenous appreciation of nature being fundamental to the well-being of all?
Thank you, Marilyn, for this perspective, because, my next question was, I was intended to ask you, as I have already mentioned, I've been living for almost all my life in Russia, and I faced absolutely the same problem on my native land, because I was living on the border of Russia and Ukraine, and my husband is half Ukrainian, and we have so much interrelationships between these two nations. And my next question is maybe self-oriented, but it's really important to understand. Of course, yes, we have created some sort of the vision. We have understood the causes and the conditions which brought us to this point. But what should be done? Who is in charge of changing something? Are we going to just find good governors, good presidents, or name it, who will change the situation? Or we need to address to the United Nations or other international organizations who have to, who were intended then they were established. The United Nations was the organization to solve the international conflicts and not to make it possible for these conflicts in the future. Or what should we do as a human beings? So what can be done on what levels, and coming from words to actions, what each of us could do and could start doing in order not to stay in this, ivory tower of wisdom, but to bring this real peace to the lands where we live, where we belong to, the lands which we love, to the people which we love. So that's my question. Please take a word who want to be the first.
If I may respond to what Marilyn said about Gaia intelligence, in the book that I'm working on now that applies the spiral dynamic methodologies to climate change, it seems to me, yes, it seems to me that it is inevitable, if we're going to save ourselves and the planet, that we have to we have to exit this stage that is developed with the Industrial Revolution, that placed man in charge of everything, that placed the human being separate from nature and made him superior to it. We need to return to nature if we're going to save ourselves from an imminent demise due to climate change, or look for the next structure beyond what the UN can provide. You have to look at those natural systems that evolve the way Gaia has evolved them for billions of years. The next stage after nations, especially with all the other dynamics that are manifesting, is no longer a command and control structure, but a decentralized indigenous groupings capable of self-governing, with the idea that they follow a certain set of guidelines dictated to us by the threat of climate change. That wars are unproductive. Restorative and regenerative efforts towards rebuilding Mother Nature requires us to be on the same page of values and how we approach dealing with governing structures and everything else. What it would look like, there'll still be, smaller communities, larger communities. It will all depend on the type of formations that are necessary as informed by the local culture that will design it. But yeah, we have to get in touch with the Gaian intelligence, which is in the spiral dynamics. It's the second tier. It's the turquoise system that is, to bring it back to your point, Marilyn, is an exponential expression of the tribalistic values of the indigenous intelligence of the local, the Native Americans and so forth. So it is that expression taken to the power 2 that takes advantage of everything that we have created, from technology to urban planning to smart cities to living cities and so on, and begins to design a system that is informed by Gaian intelligence.
Thank you, Said. Alexander, you wanted to add also.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we're going, and then again, we're so strange. It reminds me of this Monty Python sketch from The Life of Brian, where everybody's sitting around and saying, "We have to take action. I second that. Yes, and now let's write that down. Oh, now we should." And so it's a little bit frustrating, because how are we? The call here is what are we doing here? We're talking about it, great. How are we living this? How are we being this? And I think in our own way, all of us can, even if we don't mean flying right now to this center of the conflict. This is clearly, as Said and Marilyn and David and Neri have been saying, and you, Marina, this is such a multidimensional problem. It is so entangled. I wouldn't just say intertwingled, because that's the nice aspect, but it's so entangled at this point that it requires multi-layered response. And this is, I think, what the idea of ACE and the idea of spiral dynamics altogether is calling for. So for me, this is actually a test for humanity. There's the meme that goes around where you see a human being doing something really silly, and then the comment is, "We're not going to make it, are we?" Are we going to make it as a species on this planet? My father.
We have no choice.
Right. Well, exactly. So but what is it going to take from it? What is it calling for? So I just want to say that my father, Irvin Laszlo, talks about the need for an upshift in consciousness. And I think this is for our species now. And it's, for me, actually not at this point an upshift. It's a snap forward. It's a snap forward. It means that we need to show up in a different way, each and every one of us in a different way in the planet. So David's game helps tremendously with the practices of doing that. It's not a finite game, it's an infinite game. And for me, the question is about how we don't all have to address the problem head on. Practicing the art of obliquity, being oblique about it. Some people are going to have to be right there in terms of the negotiation skills and in terms of the direct peace brokering, etc. Yes. Others of us can be involved in bringing in ways of being that allow us to do what Buckminster Fuller called for, which is establish the trim tab. It's not about the tipping point so much, getting everybody on board so we're all pulling in the same direction. Nah, I think it's going to happen. But if we can, in our own ways, have that trim tab, which is that part systemically, which starts to move the larger system in a different way, right? So what are we doing in our home with our neighbors? What conversations are we having? Indeed, in contemporary field-based physics and in quantum theory, we understand that we build up what Rupert Sheldrake and others will talk about morphogenetic resonance. We'll talk about the Akashic field, however you want to look at it. But the point is, we set up that way of being in our own self. I'm just noticing my own intensity right now isn't particularly peaceful, but how we are with each other is part of the patterning that we bring into the world. The animals sense it, the plants sense it, other human beings sense it. And when others are enraged, enraged and blinded by that. How do we show up? Intellectually? How do we show up? No, with heart. So I think this is the challenge to human well at this time on our planet.
You know, Alexander, I recollect the statement of somebody about that every decision, every action which we take, we do it out of fear or out of love. So you mentioned this, what would love do at this situation? And it's a matter of choice, not only amidst the war conflict, it's a matter of choice of everyday, day-to-day actions. But at the same time, I really understand, and I hear you, Neri, with your pain about the rage of Israeli people and Palestinian people, because first of all, when you are in this situation, it's almost impossible, but very difficult to stop this vicious circle of violence. That's the first part. And speaking about myself and my country, it's also a huge pressure of propaganda and information, altered information. Plus this propaganda is from both sides. So it's neither true from the Russian side, it's not the whole truth from the Ukrainian side. The truth is somewhere in the middle. But how to get rid of these imposed opinions, these judgments, these decisions which mass media are bringing to you? It is so pleasant, it is so easy to take this chewing gum and to perceive it as it is, but it is not so. And today's discussion shows us that the causes of the conflict and the conflict itself is much more complex than we see it from the mass media and from the official sources of information. So that's why I am asking, of course, it's a matter of choice of everyone, but how could we as living citizens, as people who work in the integral approach, what should be done in order to help others stop from perceiving everything as it is told us? And maybe it's sort of about critical thinking, or maybe heart-based practices, or maybe it's something wrong with the human morality as a whole, which brings us to this action out of fear instead of acting out of love. Because it's great to say, let's connect to nature, but when people are in this safety mode, the condition and the situation, then they can't really maybe judge in a wider way what should be done. So that maybe that's too wordy.
Yeah.
But yes, David, you have an answer.
Okay.
I don't know that I have the answer, but I have an answer. So let me speak to a few things that both you and Alexander spoke to. So the question that I've been asking for some 40 odd years is, how do we create peace on Earth? Not how do we resolve conflicts in specific hotspots in the moment, but what is a long-term strategic systemic intervention look like? And what we found in 1986, when we passed the torch of peace around the world and engaged many, many people, 1 billion people, including the former president of Russia, Gorbachev, and Reagan, and many others, was that you had to operate at another level. Sometimes they call it track 1 and track 2 diplomacy, but it's got many different names for it. So we started playing at a different level of the chessboard. And we started discovering there are a lot more moves available when you play at the second level of the chessboard. For example, wherever the torch of peace went, wars stopped. like fighting stopped. Why? Because we were disarming their sort of very stultified ways of thinking about things. So when we distilled what the learning was that allowed that to happen consistently over these 86 days, we discovered these strategies. This was empirical. It wasn't conceptual. It wasn't a model. It was learned by watching what happened. And then we said, well, what if we could extrapolate that and create it into a process and scale it across the planet? And what if we could anchor it community by community across the planet? So I'm setting the stage here a little bit. I want to speak also to the notion of a trim tab. So as one does that, how does one design it so it becomes a trim tab? So you get the most opportunity with the least amount of effort. And the third thing I want to speak to as a context is the notion of a morphogenetic field. So right now we are in a morphogenetic field where fear is the dominant belief system or the dominant energy going on the planet, being reinforced by the media every day. And the media is, and our lower, shall we say, unconscious self is always picking up on that energy. So fear is dominant right now. So we have to build a new field. How do you build a new field? Well, what Rupert Sheldrake said and others is that you have to build new practices that build that field, because it's behavioral. It's not just consciousness, but it's behavioral. The new practices enable it. You start peeling potatoes differently, and it's building the field, and all of a sudden it transfers new techniques, new possibilities. So we've been building the morphogenetic field, and what we've concluded is that 40 million people, 1/2 of 1%, based on some of the deep wisdom teachings, indigenous wisdom teachings, is a tipping point for shifting a field. And so we've been working on this strategy to get to 40 million people who believe in this new possibility. If you wish it to be different, but don't believe it can be different, you're not part of the solution yet. What does it take to actually get to the place where you believe in this new possibility? So what the game does is it creates what we call dream keepers. These 7 unit practices shift people from impossible, no way, this is the way humanity is, we're just going to go from one breakdown to another, to I do believe it. It is possible. We can do this. My friend, I'm seeing is on this call, David Wick. Hi, David. So David and I are working on a very amazing strategy, if I do say so. So David was the former president of the Rotary Club, Rotary E-Club, I keep getting the names wrong, of World Peace, but basically this amazing group, the Rotarians around the world, of which I would say there are 46,000 clubs, 46,000 communities. So we're working, for example, with the Rotary Club to create PO zones, peace on earth zones, where we start building a morphic field in community by community by community. 10,000 of them gets us to 50 million people. So this is the process of systematically, strategically designing a second order change intervention, which builds the new field, builds the new practices, grounds it community by community, scales it globally. And right now, one of the great gifts we have, although it doesn't look like a gift, is that the systems are deconstructing.
Yes.
We are in major deconstruction mode. You can't build the new unless the old deconstructs. The Middle East is the catalyst. I said that earlier. It is way bigger than the Middle East. It's where so much of the dysfunction has come together on the planet. So as it breaks down and as it brings more players in and as it can metastasize, it can also transform if we know how to work with it. So one counterpoint is getting 40 million people to believe in the possibility, not just a wishful thinking and hope that the world is better, but I don't do anything. And part of that is by learning how to build these practices. And we're seeing it happen. One last thing I'll add is a sort of hopeful moment. Very different place on the planet, very different kinds of dynamics, but we have been successfully able to motivate the African Union to partner with us. And we offered up a dream, a big idea. The bigger the dream, the more people respond to it. Little ideas don't seem to capture people's imagination particularly. And we said, what would it look like if Africa could become the first place, the first continent to have peace on earth by the end of the decade? Would you be open to this idea? And they said, yes, we'd love to try to be the first. We'd love to step up and be a global leader. And so they said yes, and we're now in the process of designing that strategy. So this is the immune system response to the antigen. And the Middle East is the place that is causing the catalysis. And it needs to go through its process. And if we have something ready, and if in the meantime we're also building the field and the practices and showing best practices, we will have the bucket fuller, create the new while the old goes through its deconstruction or dies. I don't know what the Dharma is of the Middle East, but I do believe that it has an important role to play. Maybe it's a cautionary tale. Maybe it's the place where the breakdown happens and it's so dramatic that it forces us to look differently. But one thing is for sure, if the breakdown occurs and there's nothing to replace it with, then it's a wasted crisis. And so I'm really working on what to replace it with, very pragmatically, very systematically, community by community. I honor my brother David here because he's really engaging the Rotarians as a key player because they know how to make stuff happen in communities, and we have other key players. So those are some answers to your question. What does change look like? How do we take action? How do we ground it? How do we not just be spinning around trying to do something but not knowing what to do? Will this get us all the way? Well, I honestly believe we will get there. I'm a dream keeper. I'm an official dream keeper. I believe in humanity. I believe in our future. And I believe we can do amazing things if we are smart enough and intelligent enough to figure out how to do it. And that takes time, thought, care. And I would also add learning how to get the best thinking in play. And I would say this gathering should continue. We should keep working together and thinking together. It shouldn't be a one-off. I'm not a big fan of one-offs. So I'm open to, let's continue the conversation of the Middle East as a catalysis opportunity for humanity's evolution.
Thank you so much. Neri, I'm sorry, shall we give the word to Marilyn, because I think that she's going.
I love to hear her. So
yeah, and
yes.
then we will give the microphone to you. Yeah, Marilyn, please.
So thank you. And thank you, David, for being a dream keeper. I think that I wanted to share that many of the things that you're pointing to have come up again and again in the last 3 days when we've been looking at feminine, or what I think is more Gaian intelligence. We're talking about Israel and Palestine being in conflict, but I also I live actually in the eco-village of Findhorn in Scotland. And last week we had a world gathering of Gaia education and global eco-village networks. And they pointed out, the eco-villages in Israel and in Palestine are not at war. The eco-villages in Ukraine and Russia are not at war. In fact, they're doing really major invitations for people in the places of conflict and attack to come and join in the eco-villages. Eco-villages are a long-term investment in permaculture, in living with nature. And so I think that what you're pointing to is something that has been done. Another colleague who's here, Indra Adnan, she talks about a parallel polis. So she says, we don't need to wait for the new system to come in. We need to invest in building the new one that we want to come along, and that it will run in parallel until the old system disintegrates or deconstructs, as we're seeing. So I think that the idea also of the practices are really important. Something I do every Saturday is hold an Islands of Calm meditation. Why? Because several years ago, before when COVID lockdown happened, David Spangler inspired me, and he said, you know, when you can find the island of calm in yourself, you have the opportunity to influence up to 1,000 other people. So I think this is the same kind of universal pattern that you're really speaking to, David, that we, by continuously investing in the light in the world, in what I want to stand for is aliveness in humaning well together. And the more that we commit on an individual basis to do that every day with just the smallest practices, I think that we're building that groove in the field. And we need to recognize that that isn't just one, it is one field altogether when we stand back and realize it from a meta perspective. But there's a million subfields that this is growing through. They're all fractal and entangled. And in the best of worlds, they're intertwinkled. Yeah. So I just wanted to say, I think there is much that we can do, and we just need to make the choice. It is always about a choice.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. It's so beautiful. Your wisdom is always beautiful, and I adore what you're saying. So we, as we discussed, yes, we have another 10 minutes, please. So stay with us. So please, Neri, could you just, we have Neri, when I would ask Said to give your point of maybe summarizing of what we have said, and I would like to invite Alexander to show us a couple of slides which he created for our today's meeting, just to finalize our conversation today. So please, Neri, the word is yours.
Just a small idea related to Gaia. In a way, Don was talking about being a gardener in these conflicts. So we need to take gardener decisions. And we need also to get a power, an ability to act. So it's finance, it's organization, it's set of ideas, but we need that to have it focused on this conflict or other conflicts. So that was the remark I wanted to say, to add.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that Martin Heidegger said that to dwell is to garden. That's my favorite statement about the city creation. It's so beautiful. So Said, please, up to you.
Yes, thank you, Marina. I think this has been an absolutely brilliant discussion from the get-go, but especially the last 10 minutes with your contributions, Alex, and David, you painting the what second order change looks like. It all points to that the current systems are in a decay state, and that we need a different form of complexity that works differently. And those people who really know how that works should be empowered to really take the lead on these issues, especially when we're facing a threat as ominous as climate change. You know, to add to the idea of there's opportunity when the current systems collapse. We use an adage that Don coined in his colloquial Texan way. It says, getting rid of what you don't want is not the same as what you do want. And so he encouraged us to work on creating the system that we do want. 80% of the time is focused on that. And then let the current system, you know, find its own entropy. And as it falls apart, you know, the new system is in place, that the common person on the street sees that and says, wow, that's an alternative, you know, opportunity for what we have now that's more conscious, more inclusive, and so forth. And so that's my observation, Marina. Thank you all. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Said. And before I give the word to Alexander to finalize our discussion, I just wanted to say that I've tried to watch and somehow to react, and I saw that our speakers also answered some questions throughout the discussion. I will save the chat and we will send it to you in order to have the opportunity also to read everything, because there are some calls for action, and I will highly appreciate if David and David shared the opportunity to join the Peace on Earth space, and I would invite us to share again some information if you want to share in the chat, so we will share it with everyone. And there were great observations about from Janice. I think that to start from ourselves, and I think that it's really important to just to smile to your neighbor and to say thank you in the grocery shop. It's maybe a small step towards peace, but this confrontation and acting out of fear is just a bad habit, which also could be somehow changed, and I think that really peace starts from each of us. So thank you for this discussion. I would say that I think that we will continue this series of conversations, because today's conversation, we even couldn't cover all the topics which we wanted to discuss today. So please, let's stay in touch. And we will send you the information shortly about our next meetings. And please, Alexander, conclude our today's meeting with your idea.
Thank you so much. And I just want to share just a couple of visuals on this. Don Beck said, I love this, when he said this exactly in this kind of Texan way. He says, no more prizes for predicting rain, only prizes for building the ark. Yes, we are talking so much about, the problems, and it's going to be bad, and we need to do, what are we doing? How are we being in this way? And I think that's a wonderful admonition and call from Don. So let me share with you then just a couple of visuals on this. Just a couple. So look, this idea that we are living in a world that is defined so homocentrically by, by this view of the nations, of our societies, it's not that this is irrelevant or even unimportant. It is deeply important because of who we are and our identities, culturally, yes. And there's a deeper identity as well. Remembering, bringing the membership back into the knowing that we are Gaian, as Marilyn would say. This unitive narrative is one that is woven from this deeper understanding and perspective that it is one home, one planet, and that we are all people. So how do we do this kind of shift? I want to take this quote from Maturana, Umberto Maturana, a systems thinker. So this is a lot of the systems perspective. He talks about love. He says, love is the domain of those relational behaviors through which another, a person, being, or thing, arises as a legitimate other in coexistence with oneself. So coexistence is key here, and legitimate is key. When we see the other as a non-human, we can kill them or do horrific things. But when they are arising as a legitimate other, understanding that we are people, and so are everyone else, we are all people. So how do we then co-arise in this moment? And I think this is about this remembering again, and this unitive narrative, the restoring our narrative of love, connection, and meaning. But this means that we must cultivate and develop not just collective intelligence, but empathetic intelligence, deeply, deeply, the capacity to say, so wait, you just bombed the crap out of me, excuse my French. So what? And what's going on, man? And we know what's going on. We actually do know, but we get blinded because it really hurts, really hurts. How can we know and listen into each other's hurt, right? So the final part here is just to think about places in the world where we move away from what is a very Western approach to strident individualism and self-righteous independence, and I have the right to bomb you and this is my way, whatever. But understanding, as Bishop Desmond Tutu would say, that we are made for interdependence. If the world had more Ubuntu, we would not have war. I believe this. And it's in the Cameroons, it's called Danifo. In Indonesia, they have practices that are very much the same. In Australia, the Aboriginals hold this also in ways that we're all part of a web of life. How do we remember this narrative? And for me, just the last slide here is just this is the way I like to think about peace. People engaged in active, co-creative evolution. This is, and so, right, these are just words, right? Yes, but the question is, how do we do this together? How can we be humaning well together, like Marilyn says, for higher intertwinglement potentials? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all of you, for the speakers who contributed, for the wisdom of our participants who shared their wisdom in the chat. So we'll send you the safe chat. I will send you the link to the recording, which is in the chat, by the way. See you soon. Let's stay in touch and let's connect together in order to create this space of peace on our planet and to be this change which we want to see in the world. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful for all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bless you.
Shanti Shanti.
See you. See you all.